All right, we're going to take another look at this P1-1. I mentioned the do not show on startup a couple of times. I'm not ready to do that because there isn't really a way to turn it back on once it's turned off. So I'm just going to keep closing it for now. I mentioned that I want to see if the system color for the selection, that one might be a little bright. All right, we'll go with that. All right, so once they're selected, I think that was the one that showed up a little bit better on the video. So if we go to the recent, will show up. So there's part 1-1. It should also show up, well, now it's not in here because I think I moved the folder. And then if we do an open, well, it's supposed to go back. So there's always going to be some navigation involved, making sure that these files are where they're at. So I have the part, and holding down the middle mouse button, we're going to be able to rotate this. So one of the issues that comes up, and the reason that we want to take advantage of the parametrics, is if we do the math on this, so there's the 1.5, 2.75, 1. If we decide that that 3 really should be 4, and that should really be 6, and I need to rebuild it so that it updates, then now the hole is off-centered. So if we want that hole to remain on center, one of the things we can do is go back and edit the sketch. And I'm going to utilize the driven dimensions here just so that we can see it update. I probably would have just selected different when I started the geometry. So I prefer going corner to corner. And let's do that again. So under line, or the arrow next to line, is a center line. Center line and construction line mean the same thing. So we're going to take a look at that here in a second. So I'm going to go from corner to corner. And notice that even though we drew a center line, over here it's for construction. So wherever you see those, they're going to be the same. All right, so I'm going to drag along the center line that I created and add the inferred relation for the midpoint. And my dimensions are still there. The distance is still there. So let's see what we get on the geometry. Distance 7, diameter 1, and distance 9, but notice they're grayed out. That's telling me that those are driven dimensions. So these are for reference at this point. If I try to change one of those, it's going to tell me that it can't be changed because it is driven. And if I uncheck the driven, it's going to create that error because the geometry is for that location is being driven by the construction line and the midpoint. So they do kind of the same thing. And I mentioned previously the sketch relation, so this one isn't too bad. We have, by virtue of creating the rectangle, a vertical, a horizontal, a vertical, horizontal, coincident to the origin. All of our distances, of course, the midpoint, and that was just to be able to visualize. The problem is that as the sketches become more complicated and the little green dots become more of a nuisance than anything really functional, because I can click and I can see the horizontal and the coincident. I can click on another object and see the vertical and the coincident and have just the items that are being applied. So now, rotating with the middle mouse wheel, and the middle mouse wheel, scroll wheel up and down a little bit, kind of zooms. Then going back into the sketch, well, I guess not going into the sketch, but double clicking, and there is the warning for the driven dimension because I was a little close. So a double click and a double click and a rebuild, and it gets a little bit bigger, and a double click on the sketch. Now we're at 4 and 2.5, and so those driven dimensions are updating because that geometry is going to stay in the center. All right, so in the one example, I converted my center line to an object line. So from construction geometry, I toggle it. This is now going to create, we're going to have the contour, we're going to have a region, a region, a region, and a region. So I'm expecting an error. And if we show the problem, it's just going to just tell me that there is a wrongly shared endpoint. That doesn't really mean anything. So let's go in now and select the contour. And based on what selections we make, we can get different results. So by filtering this, it's not going to include the hole in this case. One or more contours. Well, I'm probably messing with it again because the geometry previews. All right, so that one went with the regions. So we have contour, contour, and a contour. And closed in contours which do not self-intersect. All right, so let's take that off and we'll go to there. And so it's not liking something in there, and it's still giving me the error. So our friend Control Z, and Control Z will take us back, and we can experiment with those geometries. Okay, so I'm going to save this again, and if we go with the new part inch front plane, so it's going to be a little bit quicker. This time I'm going to go with a center rectangle, and I want the from corners from midpoints. So my reasoning on the corners is that if I need to edit that geometry, midpoints are more temperamental in my opinion, setting the geometry. So that was our 5.5. I missed 5.5 and 3. And we can do the circle at the same time. Oh, I'm jumping around a little too fast there. Let's go ahead and extrude. Going to be at the 1 inch. All right, so in the first examples, we already had the hole in the sketch as a nested object, and so we want to go back and add the hole as a secondary item here. So we're going to cut or remove the material by adding the construction line, drawing the circle at the midpoint of that center line. And then now, instead of creating a bus, we're going to go to extruded cut. Now, if I make this 1 inch, again, I want to build in some of that logic and have this do some calculations for me. So through all says that if there were 6 of these lined up with a 1 inch gap in between, it would find all 6. Up to next says go find the next available surface and ignore the other 5. So as a logic, the through all is going to work fine in most cases, and we have the exact same geometry. So the point I want to make is I don't really care how you get there. It's the way that you see the geometry and what makes sense in your workflow. There is also the possibility of later on I would want to manipulate this geometry in such a way that I could make changes outside of the original boss extrude and do more what if scenarios by tinkering with that geometry. So just real quick, I'm going to show the rollback. If you ever happen to grab the rollback bar and move it up, notice the hole goes away. And there is this thing called direct editing that move copy bodies. And right now we're in relations. I just want to do a translate. And we're going to translate along. Oh, I got that. I need an edge. There we go. And I want to go at 2-inch intervals. And I thought that we need a copy and the number of instances. Well, let's go. So I can very quickly create solid bodies, and that's how I'm going to end up with the first instance plus 10 more. All right, so now if we go to cut extrude, right now it's saying up to next. No, it did do through all. Oh, there is a selection filter. So if we had the all bodies, then we would see the cut going through everything. So depending on how we created this geometry, we could end up with some different scenarios. But the main thing is up to next is going to stop at the first part. Through all is going to go to the very last one. And then if for some reason we wanted to stop after 4, we would need to go in and pick. All right, so just start getting a sense of the end conditions. Of course, a blind end condition. Let's see if we go back into and edit the feature. And then the blind end condition is going to be the one that we do probably most often, is 0.5. So it just goes through the first part ½ inch. All right, so we'll utilize those a little bit more for the first parts. It is mainly, if you're not getting what you expect, it's probably because we've clicked on some of those other parameters in the process of making our solid.